Listen up, future lawyers. Welcome back to another explainer. Look, if you're staring down the barrel of your criminal law exams, drowning in brand blue highlighters and feeling completely lost, just take a deep breath, okay? Today, we are going to crack the Indeterminate Sentence Law, the ISL, so you can actually survive finals week. We're going to break down the mechanics, do the math together, and figure out exactly how this law works in the real world. To really get the ISL, we have to look at the crazy real-world stakes of how it's actually applied. We're looking at two real Supreme Court cases today that ask a pretty dramatic question. Why do some defendants walk away with a minimum sentence of literally just 6 months, while others get slapped with life behind bars without any possibility of parole? Well, the answer lies entirely in how the Indeterminate Sentence Law is calculated, and crucially, who actually gets to use it.
Let's meet our two defendants for today's explainer. On one side, we have Joaquin David. He was a 17-year-old student who, after a pretty severe physical altercation, shot the individuals who bullied and beat him up, getting him a homicide conviction. On the flip side, we have Erwin Applicator. He was a military man who shot his commanding officer and got convicted of the complex crime of qualified direct assault with murder. Now, both of these guys claimed self-defense in court. Both of their claims failed, yet, tragically, and just due to the sheer strictness of the law, their sentences could not be more different.
All right, let's get into Section 1, doing the ISL math.
Grab those brand blue highlighters, because here is how the courts actually calculate this stuff. Every single criminal sentence calculation starts with the base penalty prescribed by the revised penal code. So, Joaquin David was convicted of homicide, right? That carries a really heavy base penalty of reclusion temporal. Honestly, without mitigating factors, he's looking at a very, very long time in prison.
But here is the absolute magic of mitigating circumstances in action, creating this awesome step-down effect. Because David was only 17 years old at the time of the crime, he gets the privileged mitigating circumstance of minority. Under the rules, a privileged mitigating circumstance drops the penalty down by 1 full degree, taking it from reclusion temporal down to prisión mayor. But wait, there's actually more. He also had 2 ordinary mitigating circumstances, which, when combined without any aggravating circumstances, drop the penalty another full degree, down to prison correctional.
So, you're probably wondering, what were those 2 ordinary mitigating circumstances that totally saved him? Well, first, the Supreme Court credited David for his voluntary surrender to the authorities. Second, they credited him for acting in the immediate vindication of a grave offense. The record showed the victims had literally just mauled and beaten him up right before he went to get his father's gun. Now, the court ruled the unlawful aggression had technically ceased, meaning it wasn't valid self-defense, but he still got this massive mitigating credit for the grave offense committed against him.
The crucial point here, the ISL doesn't just give you a fixed number of years. It gives you a range, and to find the minimum of that range, the judge steps down 1 degree lower from the maximum penalty. Stepping down 1 more degree from prison correctional brings David all the way down to arresto mayor. His minimum sentence? Just 6 months. I mean, from a base of reclusion temporal all the way down to 6 months. That is the absolute power of ISL math.
Moving right along to Section 2. Who gets denied ISL?
Because here's the massive catch for your exams. The ISL is a privilege, guys. It is not a fundamental right. Let's contrast David's fate with our second defendant, Erwin Applicator. Unlike David, Applicator was completely denied its benefits. He received no minimum maximum range and 0 possibility of parole. Let's look at exactly why he got boxed out.
According to the Board of Pardons and Parole Rules, specifically Resolution Number 244410, jot that down, there are absolute disqualifications for parole and the ISL. You don't get to use the Indeterminate Sentence Law if you're a habitual delinquent, if you've escaped confinement, or if you're convicted of massive crimes like treason or piracy. But the most common hurdle, and the one that's super relevant to our case here, is that you are completely disqualified if you're convicted of an offense punished by reclusion perpetua or life imprisonment.
And that brings us to Section 3. The Perpetua Exception.
This builds into what we call the Perpetua Exception, which absolutely sealed Applicator's fate. This brilliantly illustrates the black-letter law you need to have memorized. Supreme Court Guideline AM No. 15-08-02 SC definitively states that persons convicted of offenses punished with reclusion perpetua are simply not eligible for parole under the Indeterminate Sentence Law. Now, here's a bit of legal history context that constantly confuses students. Because Republic Act 9346 prohibited the imposition of the death penalty in the Philippines, courts had to find a way to substitute it. So they now append the highly specific phrase, without eligibility for parole, to the penalty of reclusion perpetua.
They do this to prevent any confusion and to really emphasize that the accused would have suffered the death penalty if the law hadn't changed.
The core logic here is fundamentally about the structure of the penalties themselves. Parole and the ISL are extended only to those convicted of divisible penalties. Penalties that have a distinct minimum, medium, and maximum period. Reclusion perpetua is an indivisible penalty. It's just a solid, unmoving block of time. It has literally no minimum or maximum period to calculate a range from, which obviously makes the ISL math impossible to perform.
So, bringing it back to our second defendant, Erwin Aplicador was convicted of the complex crime of qualified direct assault with murder. Because of the sheer nature of this complex crime, the law dictates the imposition of the maximum penalty for the most serious crime. This resulted in an indivisible penalty. So, his final sentence? Reclusion perpetua without eligibility for parole. No mitigating circumstances could drop this down, and the indivisible nature of the penalty locked him out of the ISL completely. Game over. If this explainer saved your sanity today and helped you finally make sense of the ISL, hit that subscribe button for more visual case breakdowns. But I want to leave you with this final thought as you head back to the library. Does reducing human lives, grave mistakes, and complex circumstances to a strict mathematical formula truly serve the overarching goals of restorative justice? Think about it. Good luck on finals, and I'll see you in the next explainer.